Mic check.
Mic check.
Check one, check one, check two.
Coming straight up on you in the opening. Okay.
Right.
You get count in. We'll be ready to go. Dr. Roberts, you good? Dr.
Yeah.
Roberts, you all right?
Can you hear us, Dr. Roberts?
Okay, we got it.
It is.
Please talk again, Dr. Roberts.
Count to 20 again, Dr. Roberts.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, ready? 5, 4, Sean. 3, 2, 1.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Andre Garner,
And I'm Vincent Williams.
and we're your host for the Black Collegiate Experience radio show on globalnewsforum.com. And welcome to the Saturday morning forum at the Rainbow Push Coalition headquarters. We're thrilled to have you join us today for what promises to be an insightful and inspiring event.
For those who may be joining us for the first time, the Rainbow Push Coalition is dedicated to advocating for social justice, civil rights, and the economic equality of our people. Our mission is to empower communities and to ensure that everyone, regardless of their background, has access to the opportunities and resources they need to thrive.
Today's forum is particularly special as we celebrate the rich history and contributions of the Pan-Hellenic Council, commonly known as the Divine Nine. These historically Black Greek letter organizations have played a pivotal role in shaping leaders and serving communities across the nation.
We have two distinguished panels of guests today, each bringing unique insights and experiences from their respective organizations. We'll be discussing the past, present, and future of Black Greek life. One panel exploring a seldom discussed historic phenomenon that helped to shape the early life of our Rainbow Push founder, Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson. And the other panel will explore the impact of the Divine Nine organizations and the impact they have continuously on the communities for more than 100 years since they've been in existence.
So without further ado, let me introduce our first guest. This guest is actually a colleague that I've known for a while. She attended the University of Illinois when I was there. We won't say exactly how long ago. I'm not ashamed of my age, but I don't want to exactly give away hers. We're pleased to be joined by Dr. Deirdre Cobb Roberts. She's a professor at the University of South Florida. Thank you for joining us today, Deirdre.
Thank you.
All right. Deirdre, I want you to share with our audience a little bit about your profound history and some of the research that you've done since you were an undergraduate. I believe you lived in either Allen Hall or LAR, I believe, if I recall properly. And since those days when life was probably a little bit more carefree, you've done some serious work. And I found out, I think recently, that you returned to the University of Illinois after your undergraduate days, and you did some research around a topic that I found to be a very, serious and enlightening around a little known factoid that people might not be so aware of. And that was a history of housing exclusion at the university. You want to tell us a little bit about what that's all about?
Yes, thank you, Andre. You have
Okay.
a really good memory. It was Allen Hall
Allen Hall,
and
yes.
UC Evans Hall. So my research. So I really investigated the academic and social social experiences of Black students at the University of Illinois between 1945 and 1955, the post-World War II era. And what I found that was really interesting relative to your question was the notion of housing exclusion that existed for Black students at U of I. It was something I wasn't aware of there as a student, and I only found this out through my research. And I was really shocked and probably dismayed to know that that institution participated in such practices, but it wasn't a total shock because that was a sign of the times. Black students were not allowed to live on campus, so they could be admitted to the university. But if they decided to attend and matriculate there, then at that particular time period and before, they were living in a community, which was the Black community, oftentimes referred to as the north end of Champaign and Urbana, with Black community residents that housed them during the time that they were seeking their college degree.
Now, that's something I was actually surprised to find out about. I got to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign in 1984, and it was kind of second nature to those of us in our times that we moved in on move-in day with all of the other students into, in my case, PAR, Pennsylvania Avenue Residence Halls, without a thought. But when people like our very esteemed founder here at Rainbow Push, who just arrived in the building, let's give Reverend Jackson a hand. And I refer to Reverend Jackson as the champ, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But when the champ got to the University of Illinois, as he explained to me probably some 15 years ago, in 1959, as a 17-year-old freshman, it wasn't just routine to move in on move-in day. Reverend, as he explained to me, was a football player and a baseball player. He was a great athlete. And when he was exploring college athletic opportunities, going to Clemson in his home state of South Carolina really wasn't an option. Clemson didn't accept Black athletes or students of any kind, really. His coach had a pipeline of athletes that were coming to Illinois. J.C. Caroline was a predecessor who had come to Illinois, a popular athlete on campus, as some of our panelists will explain, I think, in some of what they'll say a little bit later. So coming to Illinois was an opportunity for him, but there was this microaggression thing that was going on here in the state of Illinois and throughout the Midwest. Illinois wasn't alone. You had to find a place to live. So historically or typically, Black students would live on the north end of Champaign, as you mentioned. That was the Black community, and that was the case when we went there as well. And those families, which were integral to the survival of Black students, took in boarders. And then what would happen after that? Typically, those families that took in boarders did so on a regular basis. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And then there was a gentleman who we've studied and found out about, I think through some of your research as well, who had started tracking Black students as early as the late 1800s. I believe it was Albert Lee, was that his name? And you've actually, and some other subsequent researchers as well, have actually documented or sort of archived some of his research as well. You want to tell us about that?
Yes, when I was working on my dissertation at the University of Illinois, they have a Black archives, archival area. And it looked at many of the students that came to the first students that came to the university. And a lot of those students, the list was compiled by Albert R. Lee. And what's amazing about this gentleman is that he was probably the second Black individual to work at the university. And at that time, he had what would be considered a high-ranking position because he worked in the president's office from approximately 1895 to 1947. I think he worked with 5 university presidents, and he started off as a messenger and ended his career as a chief clerk. And he single-handedly took it upon himself to document and chronicle the experiences of Black students that were at the university at that particular time. And once he realized the number was so incredibly small and some of the challenges that they were facing, he then took it a step further to really help and assist them acclimate not only to the university, but to make matches between students and families within the community to ensure that not only did they have a place to live, They had a place to eat because they weren't allowed to eat on campus during that time. They had a place to worship and go to church. And so they really found a sense of family within the Black community. And that's really thanks to the work of Albert R. Lee and so many families that were so open and willing to helping Black students that were attending the university.
And we found out, I think, that Albert R. Lee actually documented, from what we found at least, that over 900 Black students that he tracked over time between, again, the 1890s and just after World War II, if I understand properly. So I want to move on to some of our other panelists who've joined us. Albert R. Lee was just one of the welcoming African Americans who lived on the north end of Champaign that made the college experience possible and palatable for Black students who came to Champaign during this period of time when Black students weren't welcome in the residence halls. But there was a community that developed on the north end of Champaign. And also joining us today, we have Mrs. Jackie Mitchell and Mr. Theodore Ted Manuel, two other pioneers who live here in the Chicago area, who I've talked to recently. And I want them to introduce themselves and speak. But one of the ways that Black students, just as Reverend Jackson did, found a place to live and a support system to help them survive and to thrive was after living with a family on the north end of Champaign, they found shelter and they found support in the Black Greek letter organizations. And that's why we found out that we've had the evolution of such early chapters on campuses, on PWI campuses, like at the University of Illinois. And Ms. Jackie, you want to speak to that a little bit and the support that you and some of the other women organizations in particular found with the women on the north end of Champaign?
I was a student at the University of Illinois from September of 1955 to June of 1959. So I was there prior to Reverend Jackson coming there. In all honesty, I did not have any difficulty getting into the dorm when I got there. I was assigned to a room in LAR, Lincoln Avenue Residence, as a freshman. I went down with a girlfriend of mine who we had gone to grammar school and high school together. She was given a roommate in the same dorm. However, her roommate happened to be white. Once we got to campus, her roommate refused to room with her and literally went to the Dean of Women, complained about it, and therefore she was able to move out. So my girlfriend ended up moving in with me in my room. And that was the first experience that I had about any kind of outward discrimination about it from the university. Now, nothing was said to me about it. My girlfriend was informed as to why the girl was moving out. Of course, my girlfriend didn't have very positive feelings about people back then, but that's understandable. Anyhow, I lived in the dorm for a year. At the end of my freshman year, I pledged Gamma chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha, and I moved into the AKA house the following year. Okay, stayed in the AKA house until my senior year when the university then took the property. They moved us back into the dorm, and I moved into Allen Hall at that particular time. So that was my experience about what was happening, at the time. But we had no problem with getting into the dorms back then. Again, that was in September of 1955.
Right.
And I was trying to remember the men's dorms, because there were men's dorms that a lot of my friends were staying in too at the time. And to my knowledge, I don't know about them being restricted as to being able to get into the dorms. Right. But as you said earlier, many of them would pledge afterward, and they moved into the fraternity and sorority houses after that.
What was that environment like? What was it like? Where'd you go to get your hair done or do the things that you would normally do in your own community?
That is true. Okay. There was a lady in town, I remember, who would do your hair. And I remember going once, and you had to put your head over a tub in her bathroom because that's where she was washing your hair. After that, you learned to do your own hair, Hey, right. I had pin curls for days, and stuff in my head half the time, yeah. Right. But no, we didn't. And people also would go back to Chicago to get those things done because there was nothing available. Another thing, the AKs had a group of wonderful ladies from Champaign who evidently took a liking to our chapter, and they were very, very supportive of us. They would have meetings at a house. They provided us with one thing. There was a lady and her husband who owned a laundry / cleaners when I was there, and I think the last name was Chavis. They actually provided us with free linen service every month for our house. We did have that, and those were people who lived in Champaign who were very, very, very supportive.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Ted Manuel, I want to move on to you. So you are a member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity.
Correct.
Beta chapter, the second ever chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi.
Beta chapter.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. As many of my good friends have ad nauseum reminded me, greater beta chapter.
But we had a trivia question we wanted to ask you before you gave your remarks. Was Jim Montgomery in the same chapter as you at the same time?
Same time, same frat house.
Fantastic. And let me also remark that Mrs. Mitchell's late husband, Roscoe, was also a member of that chapter as well.
Yes, he was.
And he and I have had some great discussions during tailgates at football games, just before football games. And we won't go into a lot of the details of those, but he was a great gentleman. And I've had great friendships with some of the members of Greater Beta chapter. But let's talk about your coming to the University of Illinois. And what motivated you? You're from California when you came to the University of Illinois. I know you were born in the Midwest, right?
Born in Minnesota, small town.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, 23,000 people. Ours was the only black family in town.
Wow.
And when World War II began to get nasty overseas,
Mm-hmm.
the defense industries in the United States started cranking out war materiel
Mm-hmm.
and paying more money in salaries, hourly wages, than most people could earn in any other place.
Okay.
As a consequence, my father moved us to San Diego, where he went to work for Consolidated Aircraft Company. If there are any old timers in the audience, they might remember and recognize the 4-engine bombers that were called Liberator bombers that was competition to the Flying Fortresses that helped Hitler surrender. Anyhow, he went to work there, and my schooling from the 6th grade on was in San Diego, junior high and high school. And even though in Minnesota I was surrounded by nothing but white kids, in San Diego, there they were, plus a lot of blacks, a lot of Mexicans, plus Filipinos, Hawaiians, the gamut, Japanese, Chinese. So it was like a little United Nations.
Okay.
So it was a non-academic education in addition to the regular academic education
Mm-hmm.
that we all got by intermingling with each other.
How did you give up the sunshine? I mean,
Right.
you went from Minnesota to San Diego back to Champaign.
Well, I had moved back to Chicago in '49, and I was unaffiliated, and I was persuaded to check out the Kappa House that fall when I went to Urbana. And I did, and we got along together, great bunch of guys, so I pledged Kappa and lived in the Kappa House throughout until I got my degree, which was only by then a good solid 2 years. And as they say, the rest is history.
Wow.
So,
So-
Hmm?
you were in the service prior to coming to your life?
Yeah, Jackie's emphasizing that I was in the Air Force
Okay.
from 50 to 53.
Mm-hmm.
Some of you in the audience may remember Korea and that nastiness. Well, there I was.
Right. So I want to talk a little bit about something that I've heard Reverend Jackson mention to me and members of our chapter. For those of you who might not know, Reverend, as I mentioned, pledged at Pi Psi chapter at the University of Illinois in the spring of 1960. He just celebrated on April 30th his 64th anniversary as an Omega. Let's give it up for Reverend on his, what we call our Q-versary. So Pi Psi chapter goes back to 1929. We're babies when it comes to the Divine Nine on the campus of the University of Illinois compared to Gamma chapter of AKA and Beta chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi. But one thing that he's always stressed to us as members of Pi Psi chapter was that the Black Greek community on campus was really in the 50s and early 60s a close-knit community. And I've heard you say, Miss Jackie, that there wasn't so much competition and rivalry as there was unity and support because of the lack of Black students on campus. And I did some reporting for the Daily Illini that talked about in 1967, prior to Project 500, the freshman entering class at the University of Illinois consisted of exactly 67 Black students. Prior to the push for Project 500 in 1968, after Dr. King was assassinated, was 530 some odd Black students. So there was literally a sea change, almost 10% or around 10% of the entering freshman class. So that small population, give us an example or some examples of the types of support that across Black Greek organizations that fostered.
I was about to say that when I entered the University of Illinois, if you graduated from an accredited high school in Illinois, you could automatically get into the university. And for the most part, back then, not everybody went to college because you were able to get out of high school and get a very, very good job in various industries. But if you went to college, you were some of the more academically apt students in your school. I say this to say that we got to the University of Illinois with no problem getting in. You just did not stay. You were able to get in, and I remember going to a very large room of freshmen, and they would say, look to the left, look to the right. One of you won't be here next year. And it occurred to me, there were two people looking at me, so evidently I was getting ready to leave or something, you know. Having said that, the people that I started with, when you're talking about the numbers, the girlfriend that was my roommate, she was gone by the end of the freshman year. A number of folks were gone by the end of the freshman year. And I think as a result of so many of us leaving, this is probably why the Black group became so cohesive. The older Blacks who were there would advise you what instructors to try to get so that you might not be mistreated. Now, if you got into a class, one of the things that you realize that they could not teach you any differently than they were teaching anybody else in the class. The information would be there for you to acquire. The problem occurred in the grades you would get as a result of it. You might take an exam and there was nothing wrong on your exam and the instructor would flunk you straight out, you know, that kind of thing. That did it, because that happened to me on one occasion. And I remember going to the instructor, I was totally devastated. I mean, oh God, you know, not only was this not a C, this was an E, very big E on the thing. And the man was very nice, and he was saying, well, Miss Abrams, which was my maiden name at the time, said, Miss Abrams, you know, we're gonna go over your paper and we're gonna see what you should have said. And sure enough, he goes over every question. He gives me the question and he tells me where your answer should have been. And he reads the answer, and that's exactly what I had. And this went on for the entire test. There was nothing wrong on the whole paper. So this instructor tells me, well, you know, I'm going to change your grade, but not too much, because then maybe you won't try as hard, you know. And you didn't really have anybody to go to speak to. First of all, I thought it was me, that there was something wrong with me. It never occurred to me that the university was doing this. I mean, but it was just outright. And I was not the only one who suffered this. Many people would leave. Interestingly enough, a lot of fellows who flunked out would come back to the university, but not too many females. They would just not return and everything. Right. But I was not by myself. And I'm saying that to say that if you did survive, the people who survived were very, very supportive of you, the Blacks that were there. Right. They were a very cohesive group. When I was pledging AKA, I used to hide in the Delta's rooms because the AKs wouldn't look for me there at all, you know. So, but it was a very,
Right.
I was wise, you know, but it was
Right.
a very warm environment as far as the blacks who did attend. Okay. But we were a small number. We were a very small number.
We've got a few minutes here. I want to go on to Mr. Manuel. I want to talk about life after college. We've seen some great men that have come out of Beta chapter. And we mentioned Mr. Montgomery earlier, but we've got men like also Mr. McKeever. Lester McKeever was a part of that group. In the
Fraternity brother.
we called them the FBI, the 50s
Yes.
Black Illini, right? But then we also had great men like America's first African-American man billionaire who came out of Beta chapter in the late 60s, right? Mr. Johnson from BET, right?
Okay.
And many others. Well, you know, and of course we had on the end of the 50s, this guy sitting right over here to my right, who became the icon of the social justice movement here in America. So there's some great folks who came out of the university, out of the struggle. And I want to talk just a little bit, and I want to include Deirdre in this as well. What do you think might have resulted as far as a legacy or a lineage from these struggles and these experiences that maybe not a lot of people have heard from, including what has resulted from the support from the North End of Champaign? Let's lead off with you, Deirdre. I mean, we don't often talk about the support that we got north of University Avenue. But I know as Pi Psi chapter turns 95 years old later this year, we're going to do some things in October where we're going to actually go to Champaign and we're going to actually celebrate the relationship that we had with the Black community north of the University Avenue. And we're not going to do anything on campus in October. We're actually going to go to the high school, you know, north of University Avenue, and we're going to say thank you to the community there. We always celebrate with the campus, right? We're going to say thank you to those folks for what they did for us. But let's talk to you about the impact and the legacy of this struggle.
Thanks, Andre. I think that's an amazing idea for you all to actually go and celebrate with and in the community, because I think early on, as Ms. Mitchell mentioned, just some of the challenges that ensued by being on campus, how students were treated. And even though when I came to U of I, when I started was 1986, we didn't have those challenges, but we still struggled for having access to Black faculty on campus and still feeling a sense of community. So I think Black students were still exceptionally close during my time as well, because even though our numbers were greater than 97, you know, we were still maybe around close to 2,000 on a campus of 40 or 50,000 students. That's still a very small number. And what I realized when I went there is that the connection between the campus and the community was not what it had been during the time of the period that I was researching. And that was really heartbreaking to me, because there was always this notion of town and gown, which always made me incredibly uncomfortable, because I grew up on the south side of Chicago in a predominantly Black community. And to think to go to U of I and be told at freshman orientation, well, you shouldn't go north of University because that's the Black community or that's the North End. And that never sat very well with me. And I think that set up a relationship where Black students on campus, probably from my generation going forward, didn't have the same appreciation that our other two panelists had at their particular point in time. So I think the first thing we need to do is to honor the legacy and acknowledge that the number of Black students at U of I now has a lot to do with the support that the community gave to prior generations, and that they do need to be celebrated and feel that university is a part of their community. There's always been this separation that is an uncomfortable separation, whereas if it had not been for the community, we wouldn't be, many of us, where we are today. Even when I went in the 80s, I still went into town to get my hair done because there was nothing for me on campus. I still worked at the Champaign Boys and Girls Club to volunteer time. You know, our sorority worked in the community with individuals in the community around community service. I know I've used that word 3 times, but at the end of the day, I think it really has to be a celebration of the community that has helped to sustain the university and countless generations of Black students that have gone to and graduated from the University of Illinois. So a scholarship fund, a memorial housing fund to help housing insecure students. And I know you had mentioned that to me before, but really honoring the legacy of what the Black community did for our students early on.
Dr. Roberts, I would be remiss if I didn't ask this question, because I know a lot of us that joined fraternities and sororities joined it because people were having fun on campus. We saw people doing things in groups and we wanted to be a part of that, and that kind of influenced how we got connected. In your research or in you guys' experiences, what were some of the fun things that you were able to do that created community among you? Parties, the step shows, and all the kinds of things that we know about historically. Was that a part of the experience for you all then, or no?
In all honesty,
Historically, so it wouldn't have been my experience, but historically, there were still parties, there were still gatherings. Parties looked very different historically than they did in the time that I was there, but you still had a very close connection between sororities, fraternities, and they really did work together, but they really worked in the community. They really brought, a lot of what needed to be done to support educational initiatives. Those are things that happened very early on within Alpha Kappa, Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and other sororities and fraternities as well. So it wasn't just partying, there was a real commitment to community service in a way that sometimes our younger generations don't see. I mean, they were not only working in the community, but they were living in the community and exposing the community to a university that wasn't really built or intended for them. And then there was a lot of fun too, but there was a lot more work that happened during that particular time, at least what I found historically.
To answer your question, and also to speak to what she said, there were various projects we had within the sorority that had to do with the city of Champaign, where we did work in various groups in the high schools and stuff like that. We had to do that. But yeah, we did have parties. We did. Well, one thing that happened, the Kappa House was on 3rd Street, and evidently it was on the same street that you went down going to the stadium for the games. So after every football game, people would stop by the Kappa House on the way home for a gathering, and we did that. The AKs had parties, the Deltas had parties, we all had parties, Yeah, we did that. And I didn't try to miss any of them when I was there, but my mom talked about that too. But to answer your question, yeah, we did have those kinds of things. I do not remember any kind of joint parties that we had when we were there. Everybody had their own little party. But, and that was another thing, just to digress. Whenever any fraternity or sorority had a party, they automatically invited the president and the social chair of all of the groups, all of the Black groups on campus to attend. On this one particular time, I didn't have either one of those positions, but neither one of my sorors were able to go, so they sent me to the party. So I went. I had a really good time. When I came back, they were asking me, well, who was with so-and-so and who was with so? I had missed all of that. I had just enjoyed the party. I didn't know who was with whom. They did not send me back to another party after that.
All right. So listen, we're going to have another panel. Let's give it up for our panelists in this first segment. What we want to do is we're going to transition to our next panel. But as we're transitioning, I know Reverend Jackson's got another engagement. But what we'd like to do, if it's okay, is we want to bring. I'm sorry. Panelists. Yeah, we want to bring our next panelists for our next segment from our other Black Greek letter organizations up. But we also want to have Reverend Jackson do some photos with a few of our folks here, if it's okay, Bob.
So we want to take the photos with the panelists first, and
right.
Then we'll ask the members of the Divine Nine to come up.
Okay.
And take a group picture.
So yeah, let's all come up. We're going to do some photos with Reverend in the center here.
So we're going to, yep, panelists first.
All right, Pasai.
Both, yep, panelists from both panels to come up. If we could move swiftly, please. We're still up. We're still up. We're still live.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is what we're going to do. The panelists that are here now, we're going to take a photo. Those panelists that are on the second panel, we would ask that you would come now, and we would take a panelist photo. All of those that are in the Divine Nine, all various groups, we will do a Divine Nine photo right after the panelist photo. We will do 2 Divine Nine photos. One photo where we will be plain Jane. That means no, whatever your sign is, whatever. If you ain't the bros, it ain't hooks, so it don't matter. But we'll do a plain Jane photo, and then we'll do one that is reflective of your fraternity and or sorority. We want to move very, very quickly. Is this all the panelists? I think, okay. Huh? Who right here? No. We got. Can the rest of the Divine Nine begin to stand? And as they fade out, we're going to phase in. We want to move quickly. I said that and nobody stood up. Appreciate y'all. We good? Panelist photo? Okay, then Divine Nine. I'm thinking most of those are already Divine Nine. Everybody, please join in. That does.
Yes. Whoop, whoop, whoop.
Panelists might have to stand up.
If you flank the side, please. Okay, we have to keep moving. Brian. All right, everybody face forward to the cameras. Face forward, look up at the cameras. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone. Wonderful, wonderful. Could we have our second panelist to remain seated?
Okay, good morning again. For our second panel, we'll look to answer the question of whether or not our Divine Nine organizations have the same relevance today as they did 100 years ago when most were founded. To get the answer to that question, we brought together another great panel of participants, including Reginald Summarize, Vice President of the Pan-Hellenic Council of Chicago, Malcolm Whiteside of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity,
Tiffany Hightower, past Central Regional Kentucky of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority, and Richard Williams of the Illinois State Representative of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity.
actually Ricardo, but my buddy right over here.
Ricardo, I'm sorry.
Yep. So let's start with you, Reggie. So Reggie is one of our longer serving members of the Divine Nine on our panel. Reggie was initiated at Omega Psi Phi's Pi Beta chapter in 1983.
Correct.
Thank you, big brother. So Reggie, I want to get some perspective here. I've heard a lot of people bemoan the fact, some people admire the fact that becoming or being a member of a Divine Nine organization today isn't what it once was. I want you to talk about that, good or bad, indifferent. Let's talk about those differences and what they are.
Sure. Well, you know, just like most things in our world, as time go on, things change. However, back in the day, as they used to say, and when we were made, as they used to say, what that gave us during that time frame was an opportunity to really build a cohesive relationship with those that were going through the initiation or pledge period with you. Because of the way that it was structured for most of the Divine Nine, even though we all had our differences in the way that we initiated individuals, what we did have is the opportunity to really create a strong bond with the individuals that you were going through this process with. What that allowed you to do was, of course, build a relationship with someone that you could depend on and trust, and build services around things that your fraternity or sorority had mandated that you do. You kind of understood by going through a certain process what was the skill sets of the individuals that you were going through it with. For example, you knew when you had a certain type of brother and he was weak in a certain area, you knew that. So you knew going into things after this process had taken place, what these brothers were capable of doing, because you had went through some things. So the same thing with sisterhood. You kind of had an understanding of who your sister was and what they were capable of doing. Things kind of shift now. The time frames around going through initiation process has changed. Across the Divine Nine, the Council of Presidents came together and it's like, hey, we need to kind of redefine this process for all of us, including the time frame of when a person would go through the initiation process. You know, you hear stories back when that people was like, man, I was online for a year. And I'm like, man, you were stupid, because that's too long. But it happened, a year, 18 months. Nowadays, most of the Divine Nine has a process that encompasses mostly probably under 5 weeks of going through initiation. And initiation would include everything from knowing and getting an understanding of the history of your organization, to what are your main missions and vision is, what are the anticipated responsibilities and accountabilities of what is expected of you as a member. When Andre asked the question around what some of the things that, was so good and not so good. Well, true enough, what was not so good is the massive hazing that was taking place among our organizations and the different things that come along with that. I mean,
Like lawsuits?
Like very, very healthy lawsuits. All of our organizations experienced millions of dollars lost to lawsuits because of hazing incidents. And that's something truly that took place in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, or whatever, to this day, that could be left out in the past. It's not a relevant process within our organizations to establish whether you're going to be a good brother or a good sister, or whether you're going to serve well or not serve well. Some people felt that by being hazed a lot mentally and physically, that was going to make you a good brother and a good sister. Well, I can contest. I sit on the Grand Tribunal, which is a committee within Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated that basically reviews these type of incidents that happen within our organization, and we hand out penalties from anywhere from fines to expulsion from our organization. And I think Divine Nine all has similar type of councils that oversee these type of things. And you see things that was just ridiculous. And that was some of the bad stuff that we went through as organizations. And some of the good things that have transitioned is what we're finding is the opportunity that we still have the luxury of bringing in intelligent, high-profile individuals into our organizations that's going to assist us and continue to do what our founders, and I mean our founders across the board, dreams and their visions was. And one of the things was to do better for our communities as we go on. And we're able to do that with new processes that are put in place. We're able to screen and interview people that continue to come into our organizations that's going to be able to keep the visions of our founders going.
Reggie,
yes, sir.
In those conversations, independent organizations are making those changes. Are any of those changes being directed or shepherded through the panel itself? Meaning we don't necessarily get into how each organization does its initiation, but there's a standard, an expectation that we won't cross that bridge we used to cross, and creating strategies to actually get us into dealing with some of those projects, programs, behaviors that will enhance the larger community for all of us.
Absolutely. With the Council of Presidents, which is basically all of our presidents sit on one council and communicate and talk with each other about things and share things with each other. All of them are in sync about this whole thing around hazing. Like, we all are cutting that out. There's no exception among the Divine Nine of those that say, well, we're still in with hazing. No, everybody, all the councils of presidents have agreed we're not going to condone this. We're going to be very strict across the board and penalize our members for conducting themselves in this behavior. They all have very tough decisions that as Pan-Hell or as the Council of Presidents have to talk about, including this. A lot of people don't understand that it is very, very hard to insure our organizations. I mean, extremely hard, to the fact that I would almost anticipate within 5 to 10 years, we would have to be self-insured, which could be the death of some of our organizations to become self-insured.
Or could create an opportunity for us to get the insurance agents among our membership to come up with our own thing, maybe a captive insurance company based somewhere in Bermuda or Bahamas,
something,
or somewhere cool like that.
Yes.
Let me tell you, as an insurance professional, that's a bigger lift than we know it is.
It is.
And we could be barking down a tough tree. Let's go, and I want to talk a little bit to Miss Tiffany Hightower, who's actually an aspiring international officer, I believe. Is that right?
We won't talk about that right now. That's the eternal thing.
I might have let the cat out the bag. Okay.
However, I have served on the national board for 14 to 16 years. I've held 2 international positions, being the International Grand Anti-Grammatius, which is secretary, and the International Grand Epistolius, which is the Grand Historian, and also the 21st Central Region Director of the founding region of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated.
Well, let me ask you something a little bit.
So you qualified? That's what you're telling us?
Qualified, most certainly.
I want to ask you something more specific. So we talk all the time, I know, around my chapter, my current graduate chapter, about people bringing their best professional self to these organizations. One of the reasons, well, I'm proud of the Divine Nine, let's be clear.
Let's do something, Andre. I think it might be appropriate for us to give our organizations who've all been in existence in this country for more than 100 years, almost, who's left?
Iota Phi Theta.
But they
is
close.
getting there.
They gonna
They're
get there soon.
Yes.
But for those of us that have done that and have existed, including Iota, I think we need to give ourselves a round of applause.
Okay. So, but let me get back to a little bit of an admonition. We can be better
Definitely.
because we don't always bring our best professional self, right? We bring sometimes that half a effort to the table, but I'm always proud when people bring their best professional selves to this effort. I don't want to get your volunteer effort. If you know people who aren't coming and showing up and paying their dues all the time and coming and showing up and being at least bringing their best effort all the time, I don't appreciate that. But Tiffany, you bring your best professional effort to what you do.
Yes.
And I want to talk a little bit about your professional self.
Okay.
Tell them about your day job.
I should let my vice chairman tell them about my day job.
I'm taking notes.
You're so funny. But I am the executive director for the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus Foundation.
Right.
But I also grew up watching my grandmother in Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated, and she also was a regional director.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandmother and the sorors that I saw growing up built into me a spirit of excellence. I don't know how to operate in any other fashion than greater. So I have to.
Can I do a commercial for her? When the Legislative Black Caucus Foundation engaged Tiffany, who used to be a fellow board member of mine, we were bringing in about $300,000 a year on average. I think last year we brought in, what, $1.5 million?
Possibly.
This sister gets it done. And I think the spirit of fraternity and sorority are vested in her. But I tease her because she pledged by herself. So she takes the load on by herself. And the good news about the Panhandle is we get to do what Andre's talking about together. Because we have lots of lawyers, doctors, teachers, engineers, name a profession or vocation. All of our organizations are full of them. But I don't think that we do a good job of coordinating those kinds of efforts. So when he started talking about bringing your best professional selves, I would love for the Panhandle to be a better bridge between us so that we don't walk in the rooms and hear people say things like, well, you know, we would have hired that company if we knew they existed. We know that in our churches and in our families and in our communities, and definitely within our fraternities and sororities, we already have the elements of anything that we need to do in this country. And I think that this sister is embodying it within our efforts in the state legislature in Illinois, but I think that it's something that can happen for us across the state and across the country.
Outstanding. I want to move on to another gentleman who I've admired kind of from afar. He's a former, actually, president of the Chicago Panhandle Council. His name is Malcolm Whitside. And a few days ago, I was talking with the first vice president of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity, who couldn't be here today, but he referred to us right off the top of his head, this young man, to represent Phi Beta Sigma. And I want him to talk a little bit about mentoring and doing things for Black men and boys in our community. None other than Malcolm Whitside. Malcolm, you want to tell me a little bit about what Phi Beta Sigma does in our community to support Black men and boys and wellness in particular?
Yeah, thank you, Andre. Also, just so caveat, so you know, I'm also on the international board as the alumni chair for National Panhandle Council. And we know we just celebrated 94 years last month. So we're on a mission. NPHC is on a mission to get ready for this century. And we're working on it right now. Phi Beta Sigma, I think, was one of the first organizations to have a mentorship for young men, the Sigma Beta Club, which we started in the early 50s. It's very instrumental that we reach out every one of our chapters on the local level. It's part of our mission to adopt a school, adopt several schools if you can. And our mission is to, gather these young men and mentor them. You'd be surprised, a lot of the young men who are fatherless, whose mothers are struggling, we take them in, show them areas of the city they've never even been before. We had one school where young men had boundaries where they could not go beyond. And we just took them to see the UIC Flames basketball team play. That was an eye-opener for them. We took them to the Sox game. So things like that is just eye-opening to them. But we also, mentor them as far as how to tie a tie. The simple things that a lot of us men of Divine Nine grew up on. These young men did not have that experience. So every year we had a tie day, and we would bring all the young men, even if they weren't Sigma Betas, just young men in from the school, just show them how to tie your tie and the importance of why a tie was needed, for your interviews, for whatever, ventures you're gonna have throughout your life. We've kept track with a lot of these young men. Some have gone on to pledge other organizations. That's not the importance of it. It's make sure that they're striving and achieving their goals, giving away scholarships. But like I said, I know all the rest of the men in Divine Nine have also had mentorships, and I come from a family of Kappa men, so I've always seen how they've all addressed them. But everybody I know is on the same level.
I want to get to a little bit more of the conversation, but we've got only a few more minutes before the Black Collegiate Experience radio show goes off the air. So I want to get to our final panelists, and then we'll circle back. Rick Williams is representing Omega Psi Phi on this particular panel. Rick's a member of IOTA chapter here in Chicago, the 9th chapter of Omega Psi Phi ever founded, and he's a state rep with Omega Psi Phi. I want Rick specifically to delve into what Omega is doing with Brother You're on My Mind, which is a wellness program for us. How we had to sort of reconcile this idea that Q's sort of give off this tough guy, non-emotional kind of thing, but we had to sort of get into this thing of we need to actually be vulnerable kind of deal and deal with what's going on with us internally and how that's working out and playing itself out in chapters and in districts across the country. I want to tell everybody about what our Brother You're on My Mind program is and how it's leading, I think, a renaissance of what's important internally with Black men in particular.
The Brother You're on My Mind program is the brainchild of our immediate past Grand Bossless, Dr. David Marion, who's a clinical psychologist. And it started off primarily internally focused for brothers to help brothers. Call a brother if you haven't seen him at a meeting in a month or 2 or 3 or 4, check on him. And then it got deeper. Okay, I know Andre well, he's been quiet. I see him, but he's quiet. Ask him some probing questions. And what that has developed into now, which that happened, 6 years ago, 8 years ago? Now within Omega Psi Phi, the mental health piece of a health initiative, that's one of our mandated programs. So it's not just a gee whiz thing for Omega, it is, we have to do this. Now, the chapters have the freedom to figure out locally within your chapter, within your community, because being in a chapter in Chicago is way different than being in a chapter where I was made in Omaha, Nebraska. There are a dozen chapters here, so we can do things a little bit differently. But the overarching goal is to help our brothers help themselves. And those brothers internally, Omega brothers, and externally, primarily Black and Brown brothers. I guarantee you this program and all the other organizations that have a similar program, we're saving lives. Mm-hmm. Black lives, which somebody told me matter. Right. We're helping Black men not be statistics. Right. Negative statistics. Positive statistics, there's a good thing. And we're making positive statistics because we're also influencing young men, like Malcolm was saying. This impacts everything we touch because young men are seeing healthy Black men helping other Black men get healthy, because we involve this touches everything we do.
So as some of our social media and other media platforms sort of sunset at this point, I guess the answer to the question is, I think a resounding yes. The Divine Nine organizations are just as relevant, if not more relevant today than they ever were. I want to continue the conversation. We want to continue the conversation and move forth a little bit. I think that's okay, Bobby. Bobby's on the track. Let's give the Rainbow Push production staff a round of applause as well.
Did a great job for us.
And if you didn't know, they produce forums like this on different topics every Saturday here. Us and the Win-Win Communications team have been working with them on some other topics throughout the months of April and May. Maternal child health. Obviously, their bailiwick of social and economic justice have been going on here for a long time. It's not the same old Rainbow Push forums that you may have been used to over the decades since the 1960s, but they're just as relevant as they were over the years. So please stop by. Please give, please go onto the website, see what's going on. There's a convention coming up real soon. Yes, absolutely. And I'm sure Miss Reverend Dr. Jeanette Wilson will probably be through here again. She was here earlier to solicit your support and your participation in that. But I want to continue our conversation. And we've got some other members of the Divine Nine here. I see Delta Sigma Theta. I see Zeta Phi Beta represented here. I see other Alpha Kappa Alphas. We wanted to get as many folks as we could to participate. There's a note here in front of me that I am not digesting. I want to do a quick poll. Reggie started talking about something earlier. Made, not made. Up or down. Let's get made, or good or bad. Good old traditional, I was made or people were made. Is that something that you aspire to be, pledged or not pledged? Let's put it like that.
You
Are you talking about beat down or not beat down?
However you define it. And here's why I'm asking a question. Since we're off the air, so to speak, right now, right? Here's why I'm asking. As I go to district conventions, state meetings, I'll be at a conclave later this month. I run into young people who desire to be what they've heard about in the fish tales they hear. And I don't know about y'all, but I'm not gonna pretend I don't hear this. And they might not admit it, maybe not enough of them are here in this room right now, but they have this desire to be what they heard.
Jumped into the frat or the sorority.
And does anybody else hear that? Am I the only one? Sister Delta Sigma Theta, do you want to comment? Say your name and where you're from. Hold on now. We went to high school together? I thought I was about 30 years older than you.
Hi.
Okay.
My name is Tamara McCollum. I was Tammy Hoy in high school.
Tammy.
Yes. We'll talk later. But that is a very important point that you bring up. We actually had a sisterhood event, and that was one of the questions that came up. One thing I will say, I don't purport to any type of physical, mental, or whatever, but I think even now with doing that, as you said, with the insurance, all of the things, we have to be much more intelligent about how we deal with these things, because I've seen, like our last line in our alumni chapter, those women were embraced, and I don't think that makes you, like you said, a great person necessarily for the chapter, because you can do that and then go on your way. What's important is what we do after. That's the easy part, honestly, because that's a short period of time now, short period of time. but what happens is what happens afterwards. And so that's what's important. And that's why it's so important to have people that are part of your organization that can represent well, that can get together. Like you said, we all pledge different things, but we all have a common goal. So I think that does need to be we really have to stick to our guns with that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Well said. Anybody? I see Brother Donald Dew over there. This gentleman has a comment. Yes.
You have a question? About the Divine Nine?
For Reginald Summarize, who I work for, William Scott, who heard this on the radio this morning, and he's not surprised that this octogenarian, 84, just got up and got over here, because I worked for this brother for 15 years after retiring from public school, and when I heard that the real deal was here this morning, I said, let me come over to salute him and also the focus of today's discussion. For us to ever sideline or ignore the sororities and the fraternities is as absurd as ignoring the churches in our community. But I want to say thanks to this brother, I went far beyond a history classroom, that even now at age 84, University of Chicago, Northwestern University are both picking my brain to figure out how is this brother so energetic, so enthusiastic at this point in his life when seniors are sitting around doing nothing. So I wanted to say thank my beloved Push and thank Reggie Summarize of Lay Pensor Youth and Family Service personally, because he didn't know me from anywhere. He took me aboard on the recommendation of one of his frat brothers. That's what we're talking about. So bless you all.
I want to actually go back to Malcolm because I'm sitting here looking at my sister from Zeta Phi Beta. Phi Beta Sigma has something that's unique in the Black Greek community. They have a formalized relationship with a sorority. None of the other Divine Nine members have a constitutional relationship with another Divine Nine organization. Tell us a little bit about that. You and maybe the sister from Zeta Phi Beta want to address that?
It's a phenomenal venture that we have a constitutionally bound relationship, and the fact that we try to do a lot of things together as any brother and sisters would. It's a phenomenal relationship, to put it that way. I mean, even when I was a player in '84, you didn't really understand the concept of it until you got into the alumni chapter. I think that's when it really, sounds like, oh man, we actually have sisters that, that we can work together with and achieve the goals that we're trying to achieve.
I was made in 1979 as a member of a charter line at a predominantly white institution, and encouraged by our brothers of Phi Beta Sigma, who we have papers on. But certainly in that strange environment where there was just a few of us among a whole bunch of white folks, it brought us closer than just the colors, just the organization. We were drawn to engage with each other as students, and that iron sharpens iron. So that made us better as students, as kids, because come on, because at 18 or 19, what do you really know? But where I'm not so strong, then my sister or my brother brings out something else in me. So that helped us. So one undergrad said to me, what was it like back then? I don't know if I was, excited or insulted, but, she said, tell me a story, and so that's the story that I tell, that as brothers and sisters constitutionally bound by real documents and papers, we helped each other. We wanted to help each other.
The only thing I did hate was They were able to pledge us.
That's what I was going to ask. That's actually all I want. Okay.
They got to beat you down.
I want to bring one other person to the mic. I don't know how much time we've got still left, Bobby. There's a baby in the Divine Nine family that I want to bring to the mic. Our brother here from Iota Phi Theta. Why don't you come up here and say something?
From New Jersey.
Yes, sir. I want you to tell us about, so we mentioned all of the other members of the Divine Nine have turned 100. You guys are turning 100 in well, you were born in
1963.
Yes.
And so we're about to be 61.
Give us a snippet of a history lesson, if you will.
Well, in 1963, in the height of all the civil unrest, 12 founding fathers on Morgan State founded the organization. What's unique, most of the founders were older students that had already been in the military, had children. And so that drew me to the Iota because, when I met my fantastic Zeta wife, I dropped back in school. And so we were engaged. The fraternities are engaged in social change. And so not resting upon the tradition, but building upon one is our foundation, is our motto, is that I think it full circle now with all the unrest that's going on now, with all the political turmoil that's going on, the issues that we have with our own children, that we have an opportunity to continue the legacy and build a brotherhood, a sisterhood, in terms of seating the people where they're at. And I believe that's what built us as a fraternity out of Phi Theta, that we began to see our situations, reality, and we wanted to do something about it.
Well, more power to you, brother. Let's give him a hand. And the reason that story resonates with me because as Omega Psi Phi members, our founders were actually told in November of 1911, well, there's a fraternity on campus. You all go join that one. And it would have been easy to just go ahead and concede and go and do what was easy to do. So applause to the founders of Iota Phi Theta for thinking for themselves, having an independent mind, and doing what they thought was right. So touche.
I'd also, and I'm going to take your question. I think it's important that, my alma mater is Howard University, where a lot of our organizations were born. And at the time that it happened to the Qs, the president of Howard was white.
Ooh, yes.
So we as a people are evolving. And I think right now, when there's so many political pressures, what I'm also impressed about our organizations, not to violate any of our 501c3 thing, in spite of that, we found ways to get engaged in the political fight that we have to maintain who we are and what we have to have in healthcare, education, and housing and other things that matter to our people. Yeah. And I'm really proud of that.
We got a brother with a question here.
That's right.
My question is, first of all, my name is Anthony Travis, and I'm known as the tax doctor here in the city of Chicago in the state of Illinois. I am very elated to be in your presence and understand the true history of the sororities and fraternities. I commend you guys for sticking to it. My question is this. We have a major crisis in our community dealing with property taxes all over the country. And I know most of you probably know Andre Perry from the Brookings Institute. And he did an article on the black tax. And last week, Professor Andre Carr was here in Chicago. And he talked about the black tax. How can we get you guys involved in understanding that we need this system overturned in practically all of the states where Black folks live?
Well, I'm not certain that we're not involved, first of all. But I think I'm going to actually refer you to Brother Reggie Summarize.
I was going to say the same thing. I think that might bring those sorts of larger issues that need to get to all of us.
To the
because we
Panhandle.
don't have a CNN and MSNBC. You know, they got this thing called Nubia that's out now that kind of talks just to us. But we have the Panhandle as a way to get issues brought to bear and it can be shared with us, and then each of our organizations can deal with it as we hear about it.
But also the Panhandle has an economic development committee, and they've actually, number one, addressed and started to address some issues around the collective economic empowerment. And also, Reggie, just a few days ago, espoused the vision, and I'm going to actually let him close out a little bit about that vision for what we see as the future of the Divine Nine moving forward, since the Panhandle is sort of the collective body of all of the groups.
Thank you. What Andre is talking about when he mentioned about vision, I'll be assuming the chair president of Panhandle and going into 2025.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And if anybody knows me, it's going to be changes. And the reason why it's going to be changes is because as Panhandle, I don't think that we do well. The organizations across the board, we do well in our own organizations, servicing specific communities that we target and things like that. But one of the creations of Panhandle was about us working together and addressing certain needs of our community together. As you all know, there's strength in numbers. And one of the key things that I recognize is this. We have key people in specific concentrations, from government to entrepreneurs, that CEOs that run their own organizations. But to get right to your question is this, I told Andre, I said, one of the things that's going to happen is you're going to see a 50% increase in the impact of Panhandle throughout our Black communities. And so when I talk about the 50% increase, see, I run a non-for-profit. I run a 501c3, Lepencio Youth and Family Services. It's a licensed child welfare agency and been in business about 30 years. So I've learned some things coming along. But some of the things I know is this: we have to build a relationship with our most impactful legislators. And what most people don't know, and I even had to sit back and look at it, I said, you can contest this because I was at your affair that you organized, which was very well. They had the Aldermanic Black Caucus from Chicago there, and they had the state Black Caucus there. And we sat back, and this is what I heard, and my bell started ringing so bad, I said, oh yeah, that's just what I needed in order to set this plan in place about 50% improvement of our impact. Our mayor of Chicago, Black. Our president of Cook County, Black. Our speaker of the House, Black. Our attorney governor, our attorney general, Black. And I said,
3/4 of them are Greek.
And 3/4 of them are Greek. So I told the upcoming Panhandle Executive Board, we are going, and of course they always say, well, 501c3, you're not supposed to lobby. You damn right, we ain't lobbying, but we gonna advocate for our people. We gonna advocate, and we're gonna advocate hard. So we're putting together a strategy to address the most specific, impactful things that are happening in our Black communities and our Greeks, which most people look at us as the town of the tent, the leadership among us. And so often that is the case. Well, we're going to put together a plan to advocate for our communities that we serve, that we're called to serve, that we're obligated to serve. And it's going to involve that Black tax. We're gonna make some changes, or try to push to make some changes. Why are we taxed like this? And this is what we're getting. It needs to be changed. That structure needs to be changed. We're getting taxed out of our homes. I told somebody, I said, man, I don't get it. I don't get this. My parents bought a house that should have been paid for by the time I got to be a grown man. All of our parents did. Why is it that either my peers, or at least their children, don't straight out own that house and their taxes are not at an extraordinary level because nothing has really changed, quote unquote, in that community.
Probably lost amenities.
Well, let's do this.
So we're gonna take care of that.
And a season of
We-
broken promises.
Yes.
We will solve some issues. We won't solve them before 11:30 today. But what I want you to do is I want you to tune into the Black Collegiate Experience radio show on a regular basis. We want you to come back to Rainbow Push Coalition, to the regular Saturday morning forums, and let's get together. Let's put our brains together. Let's put our voices together, and let's continue to address what concerns us. Thank you for coming out this morning.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate you, and have a great and a safe weekend. We appreciate you.
Stay put. Stay put.